on camera.
Hey, my name's Roger Soyset, and I'm here with Sue Verhoff at the Atlanta History Center in Atlanta, Georgia. And we're with Alan Crane today to learn his story. He's a veteran of the Cold War, and he's agreed to share his experiences with us during his tours of duty in the U.S. Navy. This interview is being recorded for the Library of Congress Veterans History Project through the efforts of the Atlanta Vietnam Veterans Business Association. Mr. Crane, would you please open up with your name, address, and a little bit about your growing up?
Well, my name is Alan Bruce Crane. My wife and I, my wife being Charlene, moved here from Apache Junction, Arizona, April 1st of last year. That would be 2015. Okay. Grew up in the East Mesa, Apache Junction area. Graduated from high school, Apache Junction High. My graduating class was 1970, and we had 28 people in my graduating class. Directly after graduation, I enlisted in the United States Navy. I was sent to San Diego, California, where I had basic training, and successfully completed basic training there, and was immediately sent to submarine school in Groton, Connecticut, Newland Naval Base.
And I assume that was volunteer?
It was totally volunteer.
Okay.
I come from a military family. My grandfather was, actually two grandfathers were in the Army. My father, my mother's brother were both in the Navy. Another one of my mother's brothers was in the Air Force. My wife's father was in the Navy. As a matter of fact, both her dad and my dad actually served on the same aircraft carrier, the Valley Forge, at the same time. They never knew each other. You know, there's probably 3,500 people on there. It's a floating city. So not only did all of them serve in the military, but I picked up the torch and carried it forward, and as a matter of fact, my son was in the Army in Iraq. My youngest daughter was in the Coast Guard, and she was actually intimately involved in 9/11. And if you want background story on that, I can do that too. Only a FASC though, but it was exciting.
Well, I'm curious.
Does she live here in Georgia?
She does not live here in Georgia. She married a soldier. He's now a major in the Army, and he's currently in the Army. She's discharged. She finished her 4 years, and they got married and have 3 little kids and live in Key West, Florida at this time.
Feel free to share that background. We'd love to hear that.
Okay. You let me know when you'd like me to tell the story. It's interesting.
Well, since you've kind of intrigued me, I'd like to hear it.
Okay. I had a background in law enforcement and firefighting. I worked 35 years in the copper mines in Arizona. I was on the mine rescue team, and so that was my firefighting EMT portion of it. I served 6 years in law enforcement, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. I was a deputy sheriff. So when my youngest daughter, her name's Angelique, when she graduated from high school, she said, "Dad, what should I go in? Should I go in the police or the fire?" So she was already thinking along family lines right there. I said, "Well, to be perfectly honest, you're a little young to even think about either one. You're only 18. I have an idea. Why don't you go into the Coast Guard? Because it's a little bit of fire and a little bit of police." And so she said, "Okay." So she did. She was stationed in Virginia in what's called a small boat station. And basically, it was just like a fire station on the water. One day she called me and said, "Dad, I don't think this Coast Guard thing is really for me." Well, why not? Well, all we do is clean. We don't have any real excitement. Sure, we go out and rescue and then come back in and clean. We clean, 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 clean. And I didn't go through all of this military training just to be a janitor. I said, "Have you ever been in a fire station?" "Yeah." "Well, what does it look like?" "Well, it's clean." I go, "Duh." They have an hour of pure fright, and then they come back and they clean. The other 23 hours is cleaning. She says, "Yeah, but I don't know." "Okay, why don't you check with your chief and see if there's a temporary duty assignment that you could get?" "Okay." So she checked with him. She called me back in a few days and said, "There is a Coast Guard cutter named the Tahoma that is getting ready to do a 6-week Nova Scotia tour, and I can go on it." "Okay, sounds like a good deal. Go for it." So she signed up for the temporary duty assignment and got there, and they were in Providence, Rhode Island, taking on supplies. She went with some friends to the airport to pick up one of their shipmates that was flying in to the airport. She called me up and said, "Dad, what is going on? There's police running around, there's military planes flying all over the place. It's crazy. What happened?" I said, "There was an airliner that flew into the World Trade Center. Another one flew in minutes later. They've started to drop. There was a plane flew into the Pentagon. We are at war. You need to get back to the ship now. Call me when you get back." Okay. So a couple hours, well, maybe not even that long. A little later, she called and said, "We are all back on the ship, and we're getting underway. They won't tell us where we're going." I go, "I know exactly where you're going." And within a few hours, she was 1,000 yards from ground zero with the smoke going over. Okay, we're talking about my little girl right in the middle of it. And when I say little, she's pretty small girl. And she was right in the middle of everything. She said, "Dad, I'm scared." I go, "Look, I'm going to tell you something. You look over there at one side. You see that aircraft carrier sitting over there? Yeah. Look on the other side." See, I was watching the whole thing on TV. I could see her ship. I could see everything right from Arizona. "You see that other aircraft carrier? Yeah. You're sitting right between them. You're probably on the safest place on the planet of Earth, right there. If anything happens, there'll be F-16s and all that all over right in seconds. You just, anytime that you go up on deck, you just keep an eye out so the same thing doesn't happen to your ship that happened to the USS Cole. So just keep your eyes open, do your job, and fall back on your military training, and you'll be just fine." So that's the story of her. After a few weeks, they let them start going downtown and seeing the what was going on at the World Trade Centers. And
On 9/11, as I understand it, they'd shut off the bridges, and therefore you had all these people that normally would be leaving kind of trapped. As I understand, there was some type of a boat lift. Was the Coast Guard involved with that?
You know, they couldn't move that big cutter. Okay, it was anchored right there. So I couldn't tell you what kind of a boat lift that they did. I wasn't there. I was there in Arizona. But I'm going to tell you that when the Trade Center dropped, I was watching it on TV when it happened. And when I went back to work that night in the copper mine, I was running one of the big shovels loading the trucks, and I was having flashbacks all night. Every time that I would go through the bank with the dipper and the material is falling, I was having flashbacks of the buildings dropping. Okay. After a while, they had their parades for the responders, and her and her shipmates were invited to walk in the parade.
Right.
She said it was pretty exciting being downtown because they were appreciated so much for being there. They'd be walking down the street, and an arm would come out and grab them and pull them into a restaurant or whatever. "Sit down, eat, it's free." So back to me, all right? I told you that we're a military family. After completing submarine school, I went on the USS Hammerhead, SSN 663, fast attack. It was ported out of Norfolk, Virginia at the destroyer and submarine piers. Basically, between there and dry dock and any time that I spent at the submarine school for different classes that I took, that was basically it. We went to the North Atlantic on one of our operations, and you can ask me whatever questions that you feel appropriate at this point.
The Hammerhead was your ship, and
Call it a boat. That's
a boat. Sorry, yeah, that's surface. Okay. You were directed into the polar sea.
We
right?
went to get to where we were going, which was in the North Atlantic. We went under the polar ice cap. Okay,
Now, were there Russian subs in the area?
not there.
Not there.
But when we got, say, off the coast of Finland and Norway, we started to encounter Soviet traffic at that time. Of course, they didn't know that we were there. They have a poor sense of humor, let's say, and they wouldn't have liked to seen us in the places where we were at.
How close did you get to Russia?
How about we went up one of their rivers? We followed a Soviet FBM submarine.
I'd asked you before about the FBM designation. That's one
Fleet.
most of us don't know.
Fleet Ballistic Missile,
Okay.
AKA Boomer.
You followed him
Mm-hmm.
to where? Where his base was? Or-
No,
No?
he went up one of the rivers. It would be kind of like if you were walking along the Chattahoochee and seen a periscope going up the river. Be more like the Missouri or Mississippi River, actually, because it was fair sized. But we actually pulled up right alongside him and parallel parked to him.
How
Just-
y'all doing, huh?
Well, like I said, we stayed quiet.
So they never knew you were there?
I said they got no sense of humor. There was one time before we went in there that a frigate thought that they detected something. They were using active sonar and pinged on us. And so because they got back an echo, they started throwing depth charges on us.
Obviously not to any great damage.
No. No, they weren't close enough to hurt, but we didn't want to stick around too much.
Yeah, they might get lucky.
Yeah, they might get lucky.
My understanding is that you on one occasion got to see them fire one of their missiles.
That was the occasion.
Ah, which was probably considered to be super, super top secret for them
Yeah,
and for us.
right. That's where our crew was honored by giving the Naval Unit Commendation.
Is that in the official record?
Oh, it should be in the official records.
Is that the one that's not in your DD-214?
Right. Okay. Well, look, DD-214s, a lot of times they have to be corrected. The only thing that's showing on mine was the National Defense Ribbon. I earned a marksman ribbon. I earned the Naval Unit Commendation. So every once in a while I thought about having it corrected, but what does it matter? You know, this many years later, doesn't really matter.
There has been a Cold War service medal and ribbon since, like within the last 10 years. You don't.
I don't know if it's been awarded or not.
You're eligible, but it may not have. I don't think they actually look for you. You have to apply.
Well, that's the way it is with any of it.
Yeah.
I've already visited with the VA over at the hospital, just asking them questions.
Yeah.
And I think it's more trouble than it's worth to me.
I hear you. Your service, does it give you any particular sense of pride, regret, enduring contacts? How would you describe
I
it?
don't have any enduring contacts. I have not kept contact with anybody, basic training, submarine school, or the boat. So enduring that way, no. As far as pride, I will never regret having served, period.
What about reunions? Any
Have not.
have not?
Nope.
Tell us a little bit about the rest of your family.
What would you like to know?
Well, how, besides the daughter, do you have any other children? What's your wife's background?
My wife, until she started taking care of one of our grandchildren, she was a hairdresser. I told you about two of my children. My son was in the later Iraq.
Ah, yes.
He was in a lot of the real hard fighting, like Fallujah. He's seen a lot. So I think there's quite a bit of PTSD there.
Yeah.
So not much to tell on his side. My oldest is a daughter, and she's back in Arizona. She's married, has 3 kids. They're doing good. I'm not sure exactly what you would call her position. She was like a tech rep for, like if you have problems at a store with your bank card or something like that, then the store contacts. I think she's with Chase Bank, and then she's the go-to person for those electronic problems like that.
Yeah, I guess you knew a little bit about electronics yourself.
My rating on the submarine was a electronics technician. I was what they call a striker. That means that you're going to school for and trying to earn rate in. In fact, when I first went to the copper mines, because I had the electronic background, I was hired in the electricians department, and then after a period of time transferred over into the pit operations and running the equipment and being there 35 years. I learned how to run a lot of equipment, different things, and actually became what they called a multi-equipment trainer. So when new people came in, then they gave them to me, and I would train them on whatever equipment that they needed training on.
Did any of that work involve working in tunnels?
No, it was an open pit copper mine.
Okay. I was going to say, between being in the submarine, if you were also underground, that would be quite a record.
Underground, well, my father worked underground in a copper mine that was underground. I have never felt claustrophobic except one time in my life. And that was when we were going under the ice in the submarine. And I asked my chief, so we're going under the ice right now, huh? Yeah. How thick do you think that it is right here? He said, about 18 foot, I guess. I suppose there wouldn't be any way that we could like break through if we needed to. Oh no, it's too thick. Yeah. That was my one experience with claustrophobia.
Just don't think about it and you'll be okay, huh?
It doesn't, never has really bothered me. I've been in the electric department. We were assigned to go up inside machinery and clean electrical stuff. And it just, closed spaces just do not bother me whatsoever. Now the cleaning fluids, they would get me going. You know, the solvents there was one time I had to tell my guy I was working with, we got to get out of here. We're both laughing and there's nothing funny going on, so something's making us laugh and it's not humor.
What is nitrogen something, laughing gas?
Well, it was just a solvent that was reacting to us. So
you were getting high.
yeah, unintentionally.
Yeah. Today we're hearing about these cutbacks in Navy, Air Force,
Yeah.
so forth. Any particular comments, thoughts about that?
I don't think that they're a good idea. I'm not in favor of leaving us vulnerable in a military way. We cut back too much for political reasons, and there's going to be a problem. Okay.
Yeah. Voids tend to be filled by something.
Yeah, and let's just say we don't need to be sucker punched when we're not looking.
Yeah, I hear you. Sue, since you're of a Navy family, any particular thoughts you've got?
I do. I've got a couple questions for you, Alan.
Sure.
I want to go back to your time in the sub. Most of us have never been in one, have no idea, apart from Hollywood, what that's like. Can you describe what living conditions were like in the sub?
Let's just say that they're very close and intimate. Okay, when you walk down the hallway and you meet somebody in the hallway and you have to turn sideways to be able to pass, that's pretty tight living conditions. We took shifts in our bunks. There was always two people assigned to a bunk. While one was up and on duty, the other one was sleeping. And when you're at station, there's not much to do except eat and sleep. And our shifts were 6 and 12, or 6 on, 12 off. Okay, so go work for 6, get off probably. Well, what I did was I went to bed for 6 hours, had them wake me up to go eat, go back to bed for another 6 hours, get up and go eat, and then go on shift, get off and go eat. And so right away I put on about 30 pounds because all I did was sleep, eat, and that's it.
That's why you had to turn sideways.
Well, there's a lot of truth to that. But they did not, submarines are not really built for either large girth or large height. When you have pipes that are down at about 6 foot, you better be able to go under them without worrying about it.
Yeah.
So those of us that are in the mid 5s, we did okay. But if you were a tall guy, you had a lot of headaches.
And you probably couldn't wear a hard hat, could you?
No, you don't wear hard hats. In fact, you wear a jumpsuit a lint-free jumpsuit. The air was purified. We made our own air, made our own water, made it our own fuel. So the only thing that was limiting on our time at sea was food. And we would take on, 3 months worth of food. And if you was, we were held over on station for a couple weeks when we were up in the Soviet waters, because our relief submarine had a periscope seal that was leaking, so he had to go in. Tough deal for him. He had to go into Holy Loch, Scotland, and stay there for a couple weeks while it was repaired. It was really, I felt so sorry for them, So since we were there, we used up all of our food, and there was a storage area down by the pressure hull in a compartment way down in the bottom that had just dried food, dried milk, dried eggs, stuff like that. So almost like K rations, but they were big cans of supplies. We had to dig into that because we went over what we had thought that we would do.
Have you ever been to Hawaii by any chance?
I've been to Hawaii on a vacation.
Okay. The Arizona, the Missouri, and there's a submarine there.
I didn't spend much time with the others, but being from Arizona,
Yeah, sure.
I spent a lot of time with that.
Yeah, it's one of the more impressive military facilities I've ever seen.
I could feel the presence of the people that were hanging around it. It was somber.
Go ahead.
I was just going to try to get into maybe a little bit of a, thinking about final thoughts. But do you have something else?
One more question, Alan. If I can take you back to the observing the sub test that FBM. Can you expand a little bit on that? Was that something that you all expected would happen? What was
We
it
didn't know
like?
what he was going to do.
Tell us a little bit about that.
We just followed
leading
him
up
to see what he was going to do. We knew that he was there. We followed him. Okay. We could actually hear all of the other craft, even their submarines. Can I tell a story? I guess that's what we're here for, huh?
That's right.
Okay. We were all multi-trained on a submarine. That's just the way it is. Everybody, for damage control reasons, gets trained on how to close valves and so forth. So everyone gets trained on everything else. And there was one day that I was in the sonar room, even though my regular assignment was on the helm, which is steering it, okay, in the control room. So I was back in the sonar room, and there was a type of sonar that had hydrophones that they were positioned along what's called the beam, which is midway down, and it circled the entire submarine from front to back. And to listen, say it was directional, and you turn this little wheel, it would listen, you turn it, and then the next hydrophones, and then the next. And so I was sitting there just listening away, and I hear this sounded kind of like an old freight train running. And so I told my partner that was And E6 sonarman, what is that? And so he dialed his set around. Oh, that's a Yankee-class Soviet submarine coming up straight up behind us. Let me go get the captain, let him listen. And so he went right across the hall from sonar was the captain's stateroom. So he come over and he listened. Okay, we're going to need to make a little course correction because he's like coming right up our tail. He's going to run into our propellers.
Ooh.
Okay, so we slid over and he went by us. He was vibrating so fast, so hard, that he couldn't hear anything. It's called cavitation. And he was cavitating so much, it was just, I'm sure the whole thing was like being in an oversized vibrator. He was just, said he was probably doing about 55 knots, which underwater is really fast. Even though it's probably not classified, I'm still not going to tell how fast that we could go, but let's just say that over 20 knots.
For that
sure.
type of cavitation, would that kind of suggest that things weren't quite in sync, that it was a little bit in need of repair?
The Soviet Navy they had a whole bunch more ships and boats than we had, but they were not nearly as sophisticated. The Yankee class was on the same wedge shape like our diesel boats, okay, until somebody happened to give them the plans for the teardrop. And then once that got there, and I'm not going to tell who, but I have a suspicion, yeah, they were real noisy because of being the wedge type.
So when was the test missile fired? When did that happen? Right after he passed you, or
No, we followed him. We followed up the river, and he pulled up, surfaced. We pulled up right beside him, popped our periscope up, and we just sat there and watched. They had it hooked up to what you would call a VCR back then. You know, it was kind of similar to a VCR, and had a TV screen, and all of us up in control, we sat there and watched, and you could look right across behind his sail and actually see the villagers walking up and down the bank carrying their bundles of stuff. And all of a sudden, door popped open like that.
Wow.
Ooh, we got some good footage there. Yeah, it was exciting. I guess it's probably time for us to go.
Yeah, let's just hope that's not the one indicating the beginning of a war.
Well, you know, I'd thought about that, but we would have, we always had radio communications with America. So somebody would have said something.
Yeah. Incidentally, you mentioned sneaking up their rivers. How about any of them sneak up our rivers?
Well, I don't think that their submarines did, but you should have seen their fishing trawlers that they had. I thought they were so cool because, before a submarine can submerge, it had to go out to a certain depth. Okay, so had to be, I think it was 100 fathoms below us before we could dive. So they would sit, these fishing trawlers that had antennas on them that were like big as a building.
They wanted to get nice
And
radio
yeah.
reception. Country western fans,
Right,
I'm sure.
right.
Yep.
Country, yeah. But I thought it was so cool that I go, wow, fishing trawlers having that kind of electronic countermeasures antennas out. Yeah, and everyone just laughed. They keep hoping. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Would there be anything specific that you'd like to get on this recording? Either just general comments about your service or anything about your family or whatever.
Well, if you want me to keep it short, you know, I can. Beware, once you get me talking, you know, I have a hard time. But if you have limits on the time, then, but I've got two fantastic, well, actually 3 stories, but one of them's just a real shorty. Okay. All right.
Go for it.
Some of the things that we did were play war games. Okay. Give you an example, and I'll try to keep it as short as possible for time. There was one we played with a couple of destroyers, and basically it was like, let's say, soccer. There was an actual setup, boundaries, both sides, a goal line on one and a goal line on the other, and then a boundary as far as depth. And we were to go from this goal line and make it to that goal line, and we'd get a point. If we made it, we'd get a point. If they turned us back, they would get a point. If they hit us with armament, rubber tip torpedoes, they would get a point, and if we did likewise, they would get a point. And so we pretty well, we played some fun tricks on them. There was one, the destroyer fired a wire-guided torpedo at us, and the captain goes, "This'll be fun." So he goes to his stateroom, and he comes back with a little vacuum cleaner. I'm going, what? So one of the communications was called the UQC, and what that was it broke down sound into something that would travel through water, and the receiver on the other end would reestablish it, turn it into sound again. So he come over and he keyed the microphone, he turned on the vacuum cleaner. Whoop, 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 whoop. They cut their wire guide. The torpedo, AKA fish, took off. They pulled around and got out of the way. They called us on the UQC and said, "Did you fire a unit?" "That's negative. We did not fire a unit." There was a long pause. 10-4. So that was kind of fun. We played games with a anti-submarine warfare plane. I hope they don't get mad at me for this. Okay, so they wanted to see how good that their detection was. Okay, so we communicated by what's called a floating wire. Okay, so we talked back and forth to the plane. And so they said, well, We can't see you. This was at night. They should have been able to, you know, the sonar's really good. So we can't find you. Would you come up to the surface and breach? I mean, pop the sail up through. Okay, so we come up to the surface. Still having trouble getting you. Can you turn on your running lights? Okay, flip the switch. Okay, we see you. You can go back dark again. So we turned off and went back down, lost us immediately. And then the third one was called Operation Snowy Beach. And it basically was, it was war games where basically the whole Atlantic Fleet was supposed to be like the Soviets were invading, and so they were coming in, had their landing craft, had their aircraft carriers, had everything that they had. And us and a diesel boat was supposed to do damage to them. And we used triangulation rather than actually firing true weapons at them. We used triangulation to show, kind of like playing the game of Battleship. Mm-hmm. And so, well, basically, we went around and sunk everything that they had. They renewed. We went around and sunk everything that they had again. And so they asked us to kind of pull off, you know, to let the operation continue. And so their landing craft made their landing and was repelled by the villagers along the coast. So they had a really rough time.
Who were the villagers?
Well, I think that it was supposed to simulate invading Finland or Norway.
Okay.
Yeah. It was fun. There were some things that I would have never imagined, like being able to back up a submarine underwater. That was interesting. Everything, all of the they call them planes. The fairwater planes are the ones on the sail, and then you have the ones back aft. And so everything works in reverse. The helm works in reverse. Everything is reversed as you're backing up, kind of like backing up a truck.
Just can't go as fast?
Yeah, you can't go very fast, but it's just interesting. You wouldn't think that a submarine underwater could back up. Yeah. And there were others, too numerous to really remember all of them. But we had in that Operation Snowy Beach, we were in an area that there was literally just a couple foot between the bottom of our submarine and the bottom itself. It would have been embarrassing to get stuck in the mud, you know, but
I assume you did have accidents.
I got us through. I was on the depth control.
Well, how about other Navy ships in our
What about them?
U.S. Navy? Any of them have any little mistakes in the course of these war games?
No, not during the war games, but that just brings something to mind. And I hope this guy has passed on or at least not seen this video. Okay. There was a diesel boat that it was coming in to Newland and Connecticut, and the executive officer, he was kind of a hot shot, and he was bringing the boat in to the pier. He come flying in, had him throw the propellers in reverse. It didn't stop it in time. It hit the pier, went clear up on the pier, come down, and landed on the captain's car that was parked right there in the parking lot.
Well, let's hope this wasn't on purpose.
Yeah, well, that is not the way to advance in rank. The front of that submarine actually looked like that. It bent the front of it. I was right there when it happened. That was exciting. Right on the captain's car. There was nothing left of it.
Was this the captain of the sub, or it was? Okay, he did it. Okay, so
he did it to his boss. It was the XO.
Oh, the XO. Okay. Gotcha.
Did it to his boss. No way to advance.
Got some explaining to do.
Yeah. But those are memorable.
You packed in a lot of stories into 3 years here.
Oh. I've got a bunch more that I won't even get to because we could be here all day. I mean,
it doesn't sound like you had all that much boredom.
No boredom. I kept myself amused. Yeah.
Well, part of it's your attitude.
Well, I'm going to tell you that again, reiterate that I will never regret going in, never regret the growth that I experienced, the experiences that I experienced, everything. Mm-hmm. So I would recommend it to anybody that even has any inclinations to go into the military. Yeah. Go for it.
That's a fine sentiment to have. Sue, did you have anything else, any area that we have not explored?
I think I'm good. I think that's a nice way to conclude the interview.
I think we've very much so. Mr. Crane, your service is appreciated, your time here as well, and the recording of this we'll make a copy for you as well as for the Library of Congress and of course for the History Center here. And probably need to ask you, how many copies would you like us to make for your family?
Well, it depends on how they turned out.
Well, there you go.
You know?
We can always send you more.
I mean, realistically, you didn't do me up with makeup or anything, make me look good for the camera, so I don't know.
Great.
I think you'll look fine.
Yeah.
I mean, Navy guys aren't supposed to have suntans anyway, are they?
Boy, we sure didn't. When we came back from the North Atlantic, came back into Norfolk, all of the girls meeting their guys, they were on the pier, and they were golden brown because we were coming back in the later part of the spring in Virginia. It was beach time, and they were all golden brown, and we were all pasty white.
A little different weather where you came from.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that we did, first time that you cross under the Arctic Circle, it's just like the equator has an initiation, and this was called the Blue Nose initiation. And they would do all kinds of disgusting things to us, like put grease all over us and, paint us with nasty tasting stuff and everything, and so we had to go shower.
Did you save any pictures of those?
No.
No, you don't.
No, I wouldn't want to. But something that they did say, okay, you've passed. You're now an official Blue Nose. Go ahead and go hit the showers. Well, they turned off the heaters.
So it was cold water.
Well, the potable water tank it's the same temperature as the seawater. We were in the North Atlantic. So, we're talking water in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky. I was the first one to hit the shower. Okay. As I'm finishing up, I could feel it start to go cold. That next guy that got in, he turned it on, and I had to laugh as I heard him go, "Oh!" All right, that's enough.
Okay. Okay, sir. That's a great way to polish this thing off.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your service.
Thank you for asking me.
Thanks.
Okay.
That was